Great. I'm Sam Moss. Involved with, I've made up a name here for consulting services, but I'm working on two projects. One with social enterprise at Emory, which is MBA students starting social enterprises coming out of there. There are 6 fellows coming in next year. And East Lake Foundation, working on some projects with East Lake, for those of you who are from Atlanta and know about that. I thought I would actually start. Stephen Vetterman mentioned Judith Rodin at the Rockefeller Foundation, and there's some interesting data points just to set the context that in health, water, housing, and energy, there are $10 trillion of needs out there and there's funding right now through grants from governments and donors of $450 billion a year. There's this huge gap. And if you look at the capital markets, it's a capital market's about $100 trillion. So there is this large gap, not enough donor, even if there's not enough donor capital to meet the needs. The capital markets should be looked at for trying to find successes in creating social enterprises. As Gina mentioned, Gray Matters Capital was founded in 2006 as an operating foundation, part of Gray Goes Ventures, which is here in Atlanta, a $200 million family office. There was $16 million of capital in Gray Matters Capital. We took $10 million and said we would create a private equity portfolio focused on the developing markets and especially around access to financial capital at that time for low-income communities. So we tried to make it as difficult upon ourselves as we possibly could. But over the course of 4 years, we made 8 investments. We as Gina said, we committed initially $4.4 million. It got up to a little bit over $8 million of actual capital outstanding of our $10 million commitment. We've invested in I'll give you 3 examples of things that we've invested in. We invested in something called Cell Bazaar, which is it's in Bangladesh. It essentially became a Craigslist using a cell phone so that farmers in Bangladesh could, rather than go to a market and find out that everybody had eggplant the day that they had eggplant, they could post for sale their eggplant on their cell phone, arrange a price, and agree on where to deliver it. So providing market-based information to those people. There was an exit with that 3 years ago. It was bought by Nortel, or the Oslo, the Norwegian telephone company, not Nortel in Canada. So there was an exit with that. D-Light provides solar-based lanterns to replace kerosene lanterns in the developing world because of the health and safety issues around kerosene. They expect to reach 50 million people by 2015. They sell it for $10. It's really a remarkable story, and it's financially successful. One not so successful, Rent Bureau, based here in Atlanta, aggregated data on renters with the thought that most of some 40% of the renters are low income and immigrants who have no credit rankings because they're outside of the normal of the Equifaxes and the rest of them. And if they could get this data on this consistent payment history that they would have, they would then come into the screen of having credit records that then could actually give them access to credit. That was sold to Hyperion 2 years ago, and it was essentially a break-even deal. We may have lost a little bit of money on the cash side of it. So those are 3 examples of what we've done. I talked this morning with the fund manager, who's married to Gina, and he said that on a cash-on-cash multiple of these 8 investments that we've made, on the exits and valuations, it's slightly under 2 times cash. The exits have been at 1.9 times invested capital, and the net value, and in terms of the net valuations right now, they're at 1.7. The gross IRRs that come in on that are about a little over 25%. So whether we finally realize all of that, we'll see, but it shows, again, to Gina's and the earlier points, that just because they have high social impact doesn't mean that you can't make a good return on them. In terms of social impact, you're measuring output. You're not really fully measuring impact. But in terms of efficiency and cost savings, they estimate that there have been a little under $40 million of economic return to society by giving access to people who don't otherwise have access at affordable prices. And in these 8 different investments, have had 7.5 million transactions. So again, measuring outputs, not really looking at social impact, but that's at least kind of a highlight of Gray Matters Capital's investment portfolio.